estimation are people's comfort blanket, right? It's the safety that they expect to get. It's almost like, okay, let's guess what the weather will be like in 5 days. By the way, most weather forecast falls off a cliff in terms of accuracy after 5 days. That's one of the core Agile principles, right? Simplicity, the art of maximizing the work not done. As I often say, code is a liability. But when we work from project management, we maximize the liability and minimize the visibility into what might be valuable. Okay. Many projects are estimated before we even know who is going to work on them.
Or what really will be needed to be done. Sometimes we just have like a one-liner. Yeah.
Right. But after that, all bets are off. We don't know what's going to happen. I mean, it is 2025 April as we record this. Just look what's happening in the world, right? Like there are companies who don't know how much their products are going to cost tomorrow because there's someone in a very high position of power who can literally decide what kind of tariffs to impose on the products that you produce.
That's one thing.
That's not under our control, right? Like we can't. And that's why Agile is so valuable, because it gives us the tools, the ability, the thinking models to live with that level of uncertainty and still thrive.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Agile State of Mind. And I have with me Vasco Duarte, who is a legend, an Agile legend. Let's face it.
Hi there, Maria. Hi there, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm super happy. I'm stoked to have you here because today we have a great topic. But before I will just shortly introduce you, Vasco Duarte is a well-known figure in Agile and Scrum, and especially in the community, especially recognized for hosting the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. You can watch our episode that just came out last week, the bonus episode. I really recommend you to see it, to watch it, to actually listen to it. And we talk about the divide between the leadership and the practitioners in Agile. Very interesting stuff. But apart from that, Vasco is a co-founder of Agile Finland, right? You live in Finland. And most importantly for today's conversation, Vasco is the author of No Estimates. So he started the movement that we now call #NoEstimates. And I was looking at that, and Vasco has started talking about it like 20 years ago. Is that right?
Almost. Yeah, 19 years ago was when I published the first blog post challenging the value of estimates.
Interesting. So I am just very surprised. How is it possible that you have been talking about it for 19 years? How moving away from traditional estimation technique in software development can actually benefit the teams and the stakeholders and the companies, but we somehow still keep estimating. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, we were joking before the recording that estimation are people's comfort blanket, right? Like it's the safety that they expect to get. It's almost like, okay, let's guess what the weather will be like in 5 days. By the way, most weather forecast falls off a cliff in terms of accuracy after 5 days. So let's guess what the weather will be like in 5 days, and then let's make huge investments based on that guess. And the cool thing about the weather as an example is that the weather is out of our control. And so is the execution of software projects, right? Like one of the core aspects of project management, which is the origin of this idea of estimation for software development, although estimation in general is, of course, a much broader idea. But when it comes to managing software development, estimation comes straight from the ideas, the theory, the practices from project management. And project management expects that control is exerted by the observer, the project manager, right? Like the project manager controls the development of the software. Now, anyone who's worked more than a couple of weeks in a software development project knows that there are a lot of things that are outside our control. Like when are people going to be ill? When is an urgent all-hands meeting going to be called? When is a critical server going to be down and the whole team stops to work on the problem until it's fixed. Like all of those things are happening all of the time and are totally out of the control of the teams or the project managers. Yet, the whole idea of estimates, the idea without which estimates make absolutely no sense, is that we control what happens in the future. Now, sure, of course, we control more or less what happens in, 5 minutes, 5 hours. Some would argue even 5 days. But after that, all bets are off. We don't know what's going to happen. I mean, it is 2025 April as we record this. Just look what's happening in the world, right? Like there are companies who don't know how much their products are going to cost tomorrow because there's someone in a very high position of power who can literally decide what kind of tariffs to impose on the products that you produce.
That's one thing.
That's not under our control, right? Like we can't. And that's why Agile is so valuable, because it gives us the tools, the ability, the thinking models to live with that level of uncertainty and still thrive. And I think that we're going to talk about this, I'm sure, in this conversation, but no estimates is just the idea of taking Agile concepts, practices, models, and turning them all the way up to 11, turning up the good, as Wood Israel likes to say.
Exactly. And I would like to just add that, I used to think, and as many of us do, with the Kinefin framework and thinking about, okay, we are in the complex, right, realm, but there are also the simple one and the complicated one, not to talk about the chaotic one. But even the simple and the complicated, we would think that you could estimate. Like, okay, I can tell you, it's not software development. I can tell you when your bathroom will be done. And I really had just this super great experience of having a renovation at my home. And I can tell you for a fact that it's not such a big difference. It was supposed to take maybe a month. That was like the longest. It took 2 months. And I'm still not like over it. It's not over yet. So I'm thinking we just wish. We have this wishful thinking. And I'm sometimes considering, is it like the Einstein said, like, you keep on doing the same thing, expecting a different result. And you really believe one day the result will be different. And that's basically what happens with the estimates. So I want to highlight that, we just had this big blackout in Portugal and in Spain. Nothing worked. So go ahead and plan your life, right? And then you just face something so unpredictable, so unusual. You go ahead, and then you have to like recover, right? It's not just one day; it's the recovery afterwards. And
so this Kinefin model is actually a very useful reflection. So simple is a domain where basically cause and effect are understood. We can know what is going to happen in the sequence. In the complicated is where experts are the ones who know what's going to happen because it requires a lot of knowledge which is not available to the common population. Then complex is where cause and effect are only visible in retrospect. This is very important. Only visible in retrospect, meaning that only after something happened can we start talking about what might have caused it, right? And there's a lot of opacity. It's not transparent what is the relationship between cause and effect. And then chaotic, where cause and effect are actually unknowable, right? Like there's no way to know that. Now, if you think about this idea, cause and effect is a very basic principle that everyone who went to school learned. And we were taught since we were quite young, learning maybe about the first things related to physics or the environment or something like that, that there's a relationship between cause and effect. Cause being something that happens before, effect meaning the consequence of what happened before. Now, estimates need that relationship to exist, right? So in order for an estimate to even be theoretically useful, we need to know that the decisions we're making today when we're doing the planning will have an effect of causing things to happen in the right sequence at the right time with the right people doing the right things in order for the estimates to be true. Everyone in software knows that this can never be the case. And I mean, just anecdotal, many projects are estimated before we even know who is going to work on them.
Or what really will be needed to be done.
And
Sometimes we
that's
just have like
another
a
layer of
one-liner.
complexity,
Yeah.
right? So the whole idea of cause and effect is at the basis of the use of estimates, right? It's a necessity for estimates to be even credible. We need to believe in cause and effect. And in software development, actually in most human endeavors, we know that the relationship between cause and effect is far from simple, and most often it cannot be predicted in advance. And there's so many things that come together that necessarily anyone planning a project is only considering a very small amount of possible causes.
Exactly. I would like to show that as a, because I have some charts from real teams. It's not that we can talk in theory, and I would really want to show how that is practical in what the teams do. But before we go there, I would like to just say, okay, so you're talking about no estimates. What's the other? What I need as a stakeholder, I need to know, there is a budget. I need to have the other teams know, or the board, the stakeholders, they need to know that we can do something and they can expect some outcomes coming from the teams. So is there a different way, or we just hate on estimates because we don't
No,
believe
that's a
in them?
very important question, right? Like the people who are paying the money want to know what are they going to get from putting the
Yes.
money in. That's a very important question. Now, here's the thing. For us to be able to answer that question, we need to transform what is a business problem into a task, right? Okay, we
Yeah.
already lost the guidance. We already lost the reason why we are doing the task, because we may have had a stakeholder with a great business idea, an outcome that they want, right? Something that they want to have as value for the business. But through the project management chain, we have transformed that outcome into very clear assignable tasks. So descriptions of things to do, because those are the only things we can estimate, right? We describe what needs to be done, a work breakdown structure, and then we estimate those tasks, we put them in a sequence, and then we have a work breakdown structure that is estimated. Here's the thing. When the stakeholders ask, when am I going to get this done? They're asking, when am I going to get 5% more user retention? When am I going to have 10% more revenue? But the project can't answer that question. We're using the wrong tools to answer our stakeholders, right? Like, and to coming back to your original question, but the stakeholders want to know. Yes, they want to know, but the tools we're using, estimates and project management, to answer them are answering a totally different question. The if I could make it in a simpler way, the stakeholder is asking, when am I going to get 5% more user retention? And we're saying we're going to deliver these features by March. There's no correlation with user retention. We've already lost the game.
Lost in translation to estimates.
And that is the problem. Estimates is like the tail wagging the dog. Estimates, just by existing, remove the ability for us to work from a business perspective, from a value perspective.
That's an interesting perspective on it. But yet somehow, I when I go and talk to the teams and we do this workshop of, okay, there is the way that we do estimating everything over and over again, but there's also another way. We can just see the throughput, how much we do, make some simulations, use Monte Carlo, and it will have inside all the complexity and the randomness, at least of your system. It won't be perfect, but it might get better. What happens? People feel that if they don't make this big job of trying to analyze this one-liner they get for annual roadmap, they don't make the job. They don't ask the architects for directions. They don't really spend time on it. It won't be as sufficient, as efficient, or as they won't feel that they made an effort enough to present that estimate. So they do all this work, which later they have to do again because half of that roadmap is not going to happen. But still, they feel that, oh, this is too easy. Easy is not enough,
Yeah, no, I do get your point. Like using forecasting strategies like throughput, for example, or cycle time can feel that, but it's so unrelated because we don't even know what we're going to do. That's true.
Yeah.
But when we do the analysis of a major feature, for example, we do the analysis, we say these things need to happen, these sub features or user stories need to be implemented. We're spending quite a lot of time on that. Then we're going to spend time justifying why we are not doing that because the plans have changed. Then we're going to spend time trying to recover from the delay, which is natural because things always take longer than we thought they would take. That's Parkinson's law, right? And we spend a lot of time having meetings justifying why we're late. And all of this time is because we started from the use of estimates. That is not necessary. We don't need any estimate to know that our team will still be here 3 months from now, assuming all things are okay, and will be still working on the business goals that matter the most for the business. And that's what we need to start focusing on. In software development, we need to go away from financing work items to funding teams. And the teams do the most they can with the time available. And then the priority of the things coming into the team becomes the most important task. The most important task in software development is to figure out what should we do next, given what we've learned so far, right? The product owner and product manager job is extremely important. And that is completely independent from estimation. In fact, it's the opposite, because if we estimate, then we don't give the product manager and the product owner the ability to react to information that we are collecting throughout the development. We get to stick to the plan, which is the opposite of what we want to do. We want to respond to change, right? So all of these things come from just using estimates, just having that mindset that we must estimate. If we remove that mindset, if we start using throughput or cycle time, as you suggested, Maria, then we can go back to the original goal of software for a business to deliver value. And we can make decisions and we can adapt to the information we collect. We can talk to customers, get ideas, implement those. We can be much more agile, responsive, adaptive than if we start from estimates.
So could you quickly summarize what's the alternative? Because I understand that now everybody's heard estimates bring a lot of problems along themselves. They actually create kind of a framework of misunderstanding. What do we do instead?
Yeah, so I think there are two phases here. The first one is to start using something like throughput or cycle time, and of course, a incremental and iterative development of the backlog, right? So we can still have those 1 year or even longer goals, but we start directing our work towards those goals. We don't plan those goals in detail into the future. Also, because that would prevent us from discovering what might deliver those goals much faster and cheaper than implementing the original plan, because the original plan was developed when we knew the least about what needed to be done. So that's step one, right? Like, get rid of the idea that you need to plan everything and estimate everything in advance. Start iterating towards a specific business goal. This is very important. Start from the business goal. This is what stakeholders care about. Then step two is to start transforming software development into much more of an investment problem than a project management problem. And here I want to be very specific. Investment means we put a certain amount of time and money towards a goal. If we get closer to the goal, we invest some more. If we get further away from the goal, we reevaluate if we should continue to invest or invest in something else. So to be very clear, if our stakeholder says, hey, our company needs 5% more retention, we discuss with the customers, we discuss with product owners, product managers, we come up with a set of ideas using, for example, impact mapping on what could be a good strategy to get that increased retention. We develop part of it, not the whole thing. We develop part of it. We get feedback from the market and from customers. Is it working? Yes. Okay, now it's time to decide. Do we invest more or do we invest in something else? Maybe we already got the 5% retention we wanted. Now maybe we can invest in something else that is also needed, like, for example, user acquisition, whatever that may be, right? Software developers and software engineers need to stop thinking that their role is to write code, and they need to start thinking like product engineers. Our goal is to come up with engineering solutions that deliver on customer value and business value. Writing code is a task. It's a tool. It's a medium, but it's not the goal. As I often say, code is a liability. But when we work from project management, we maximize the liability and minimize the visibility into what might be valuable. We want to stop that, and we want to start using this investment metaphor, right? We invest a certain amount of time and money into a direction like user retention. If it works, we invest some more. If it doesn't, we reevaluate, just like we do in the stock market.
I love that. Could you repeat what you said about liability? I think it's really interesting take.
Yeah, so if we use project management as the way to manage software, what we do typically is that we break down a goal into tasks. And those tasks are then designed, right? Like changes to the architecture, user stories, whatever. That is a recipe for maximizing the amount of code changes to reach the goal. How do we minimize? Because that's one of the core Agile principles, right? Simplicity, the art of maximizing the work not done, right? So how do we do that? Well, we run experiments, not necessarily with code. I just wrote recently on Substack a post about that. We need to validate features before writing code, right? So we validate, we use this lean startup cycle, build, measure, learn. We validate features before we write the code. And then if the features are proven to be valuable, we write that code, of course. But we don't start by maximizing the amount of code we write to reach a goal. We do the opposite. We start by validating, does this work? We do paper prototypes, clickable prototypes, landing page experiments, user interviews, whatever it takes to validate if an idea actually delivers the value we want. And that's how we minimize the code, because code is a liability. The more code you have, the more you need to invest just to maintain that code.
Yeah. And now I think I get why we keep on estimating and making plans. Because it's easier. Why would you bother to do all the things you just said if you can just plan something and then are you meeting my plan? Isn't that easier?
I don't know if it is easier, but it's definitely something we're used to. We learn in school, and also
exactly. That's
this
how
is
we
something
learn.
A developer once told me. So because for me, as an old developer, I'm not a developer anymore, but I used to be a developer. As an old developer, it was always very obvious that estimation was a waste of time. Like, why would I know what to do? I'll just go and do it, right? But then I talked to a developer who once cleared it up for me. And the developer said, no, we love estimates. I'm like, oh, that's surprising. Tell me a bit more. Like, what's behind that? And he said, if I give my manager an estimate, I say, oh, it takes 2 weeks. They'll go away and I can work for 2 weeks in peace and nobody bothers me. And then I asked, which is the obvious question, but what if it doesn't take 2 weeks? I mean, at the end of the 2 weeks, it might take a lot more. And then the developer said, well, then I'll just tell him 2 more weeks.
So easy. But I really think about that a lot, about how if you go to the university, at least where I was, it was always this lecturer, the person that was just reading or sometimes even remembering what they need to say, because they used to say the same thing forever and ever, right? For 25 years, they say the same thing to the same students, expecting people to sleep in their benches. And why don't we do like we say in Agile? There are so many great ways to conduct a workshop, to use the learning from the back of the room, right? That people learn by discovering, so many interesting concepts I don't remember because they were sold in a way that I didn't care. And this is the same thing. Like the professor, they think, oh, I had to learn so much to get here. Now I will just repeat the same thing over and over again. And that's the same here. We repeat the planning over and over again because later we can just release it and wait and just say, are you meeting my plan? Are you meeting my deadline? Is it? And you don't have to do anything. You just ask the
You're
uncomfortable
absolutely
question.
right. There's another part, which is something I've been saying for quite a while, which is that estimates are also the reversal of blame, right? Like
Yeah,
it is the business stakeholders who need to decide how much we invest in something. But as long as we got an estimate, now it's the developers and the engineering department's fault for not delivering on the plan, right?
exactly.
And what I tell everybody is like this. If your stakeholders ask you to deliver on something that is described as value, you don't need to have a detailed plan of all the tasks that you need to do. Of course, you need to have an idea, right? Like, okay, how do we increase retention? Well, we request feedback from product managers, sales engineers, salespeople. We come up with a few possible obstacles. We score them somehow. For example, the ones that are most referred, most talked about, and you say, we're going to solve this problem here. But we're saying we're going to solve this problem. We're not saying we're going to do all of these user stories.
Yeah.
And that changes the conversation because now you're helping the stakeholder get what they want. You're not giving them a set of tasks. You're helping them get what they want. And now they want to be part of the discussion, right? Like, okay, so let's do a few tests, or a few experiments. Let's see if we are indeed solving those problems which we identify as potentially causing lack or lower retention. That is interesting for the stakeholders. It's interesting for the customers, and it's interesting for us as product engineers. And I think that this is the mindset that is right now missing because we have built this infrastructure of project management where the goal is to detail the tasks, and the people doing the work are so detached from the goals that they have no reason to worry about anything else other than giving estimates and just doing their work. And because we're always late, I mean, the success rate of projects is ridiculously low because we're always late. If a team or a department says, "Oh yeah, we're late with this delivery," nobody bats an eye. It's like it is as if it was expected. I'd say no estimation is a financial disaster. Because imagine, and we know this from Agile, imagine if you could deliver the same value, not the same functionality, but the same value with 1/10 of the money. In some cases, it's possible. It's not all impossible in all of the cases, but in some cases, it's possible. And that is a win. Why aren't we looking at these wins? Because we use estimates. And the moment we write the tasks down, it doesn't matter that we could deliver it with less work. We need to deliver all the work we wrote down.
Yeah, because also it's like we it's as if we told you to do this, we expect this outcome, and we never see in the middle if that actually is enough or not, if we actually change direction. No, I just let me know when it's done, right? And then it never comes, and then there is a lot of frustration. And I think I sometimes feel that we are only talking about these deadlines. Nobody cares anymore what we are delivering. We are not talking about the value. We are only talking about why the deadline hasn't been met again. This is not the problem. This is not. And yet still we are there. And now I would like, if you don't mind, show a few charts that I took from the teams, because I was like, okay, but we are talking a lot. How do I even start the conversation if we don't understand why there is a problem in the first place, right? Because we are used to everybody estimates. We should just estimate. Let me just find, this is this slideshow. So this is what I actually took from a team, and this is the same team and a different sprint. And an interesting thing here is we see issue story points, so the story points that they put to the user stories, and work days in a transition status. So basically the work days that it took, the statuses were all the things that we consider work in progress, right? From to do till it has been done. And it's amazing. It's like we really spent so much time estimating to see that 3 story points can take from less than 1 day to 14 days.
Yeah, there's even one next to 26.
All right. Yeah, it can be.
The
Could
outlier.
we use?
And if you just look at the data, like if you squint your eyes and just look at the area that the dots occupy, you can say that 1 and 2 story points are definitely smaller than the others, but you can't say that 3 and 5 are any different because the data is so scattered. But also in most cases, 1, 2, and 3 are the exact same size because there's only about 3 dots on the line, on the 3 points line that go beyond what the 2 goes. And this is, by the way, it's really lovely data that I have seen over and over and over again, right? Like this data is everywhere. If you look at it, you will find it. And this just shows that the estimation did not contribute much information to the actual size of the work to be done, right? In fact, we could argue that if we just look at these points, only the storyline, only the 3 story points line has some information, but that information is so rare because it's only 3 dots out of all of the dots that actually it could be just a random thing, like a vacation period or a longer weekend, or somebody was sick or whatever, right? So the data is already telling us that literally 1, 2, and 3, for number 5 we don't have enough data, but for 1, 2, and 3 we could say they're all about the same size.
Yeah. And then I also see, interesting thing that I saw. This is the same team on a different sprint. And as you see here, 3 can be anything. One, well, there was one. But what I also saw was that there was some rejection. When you start scratching and like, why is it that we have such strange estimates as well? Like 0.5, 1, so many of them. And I was told that there is some rejection from the stakeholders to receive big estimates. They don't want big estimates. So we created, okay, this is 0.5, this is 1. And then when you look at it, it's like, I remember, I think it was this team, when I was looking at something that had 3 points, 3 points in my head, it's like half a week, maybe they will be done for sure in a week. And it had like 28 days in progress. Then I saw something, and you can see here, like 50 days in progress, right? And I'm like, why is it such a small estimate
then? In
fact,
there's a 3 story point story that took more than 100 days.
Exactly. And it's there in progress forever. Nobody cares. So this is so interesting that I understood that they are not really allowed to add many story points, because then they are the most the worst team. Like, oh, your team has such high estimates, so everybody has small estimates. Why do we even have them? Like, does it make sense?
This is actually a good point. So a long time ago, I talked to somebody who used to work at Microsoft, Bill Hanley, who did an experiment. They had data for a very long project, so it was like 8 months, 9 months project, and they took all of the stories, and they were at some point, let's say midway through, they took all of the stories and they just magically replaced the actual story point estimates that they had for the stories with 1.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like, there was 1, 3, 5, 8, whatever, and they just magically replaced, search and replace, changed all of the story sizes to 1. The difference between the forecast of having everything at 1 or having the exact story points they had estimated was something like 8%. 8%, to give you an idea, an 8% deviation between those two is less than half what a good estimation is supposed to have as an error. Because a good estimation can be off by 25% in 75% of the cases. That's not my definition. It's in the Dark Art of Estimation by Steve McConnell. And this is the point. When you just look at that data that you shared a moment ago, you could have replaced all of those different stories with just one. It would add very little, it would remove very little information, because we see that the outliers exist, but everything else, the mass of stories, they are all in that range of days. Whether it's a 1, a 2, a 3, a 5, they're all in that range of days, right? And this is something I discovered a long time ago, which is that if you just count the stories per sprint and you use that as a forecast, because it's so easy, right? Because you have the stories in the backlog, you have your throughput, so stories completed per sprint. You just burn down into the future from the amount of stories in the backlog, and you got your release date. I call this the Disneyland heuristic, right? Like imagine you're 800 kilometers from Disneyland, you drive at about 100 kilometers an hour on average, you'll get to Disneyland in about 8 hours. You know, you might stop or whatever, but other than that, 8 hours, that's where you go. That's how we can do it for the backlog as well. If we deliver between 3 and 5 stories and there's 30 stories in the backlog, it's going to take 10 sprints or less to deliver.
Exactly. So there are so many ways that we can use, and we also call it flow metrics in Kanban, right? And we can just, and we can use this probabilistic way of simulating and also checking not the averages, maybe we can come back to that, but like the percentage that we are comfortable with. Let's say 85% of our sprints contain 10 stories or less. So we do 10 stories per sprint or less. And that's what we can predict, right? But there's one thing interesting for me, because I saw this and I was like, what do we see here? This is the reality of many, many teams, especially if you work in a big enterprise. What we see here is it's in averages. But you can see in the light blue, you have average workdays in transition status in progress. So we have different statuses in Jira, right? In our workflow. We have in progress, we have ready for release, we have in review, and this team had on hold. And it's the first time I love that somebody had on hold, because this is the randomness of our system. So you can even say that when they work, then it's active, it's actually quite predictable. You could say, well, it will take, let's say, I think here it's the days, right? So it takes, let's say, 6 days or less to complete what we have in a sprint, to complete those stories. What happens is that we have such a big randomness which even when you think about it, okay, we estimate really well. You cannot say we don't estimate well, because if I say I will do it in 4 days, I might do it in 3 or 5. Great. I'm happy for you. What about the on hold? What about when you are waiting for somebody, right?
This is a really great illustration. So I have an example.
Right?
In the conferences where I go, I always ask people, how old was the oldest item you've removed from your backlog? You know, and some people say 6 months, 12 months, whatever. The highest I've gone is 10 years. So there have been items on hold, so in the backlog, waiting to be picked up for 10 years. Imagine that somebody had estimated that to 2 weeks. The product owner comes back 10 years later. Hey, you said it would take 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that number, especially there on the third bar, where it's clearly, it's 4 times higher than the actual duration of work. This is the reality of work that goes through multiple stations or through multiple people, is that it spends most of the time on hold. But
Yeah,
guess what? You never estimate how long something will be on hold.
exactly. That's impossible to estimate.
Which
That's
also
why,
means estimates are useless because the most important piece of information is never estimated.
and especially, given that I can imagine there are teams that are really cross-functional and they can work end to end. I would imagine those teams don't have such a big randomness because they are self-sufficient and they can finish something. Many companies don't have that. Teams rely on other teams, and once you have dependencies, and not only one team, it's like many dependencies on many other teams, and this is what happens. So the more, and that's why we also preach and we also talk about having cross-functional teams and how much faster you would go if you could remove. And actually, I usually, when I see an on hold column, I'm like, why do you have an on hold? It's like a trash bin, a black hole. But here it is so interesting to see how much time something gets blocked. And I would love for this team to come and say why, on a retrospective, like what happened here? Is there something we can actually do about this randomness? Is there something that can we bring person from the team that we usually have most dependencies with, right? And have that team member in our team so we don't have to stop and wait. There are so many ways to tackle that. But then when I saw this, it's like, I don't have to say anything else. If you want to go back and keep estimating your stuff, it's your call.
Yeah, and
Right.
of course, there is. I mean, I have my sympathy for the teams who end up estimating. They are not the ones to blame, and neither are the stakeholders. It's just that the infrastructure for managing software development that we have in place today, which is project management, by the way, is inadequate for the reality of software development. We already have better ideas like
Yes.
agile software development, something like Scrum or Kanban or Safe. Safe is better than project management, no matter how many may dislike it. It's still better than project management. We just need to start embracing the already existing and well-defined infrastructure for software development. And of course, that requires some changes in decision making. So, for example, when we approve something to be done at portfolio level, we don't do it once or twice a year. We must do that as a regular function of managing software development. So, we talk about product owners deciding what goes into the next sprint, right? Like when you do the sprint planning, we're kind of prioritizing things and putting it into the next sprint. We need that at the company level. The company should
Mhm.
have a function, a product portfolio function, which is continuously evaluating the needs from the market, the needs from the customer, the actual progress from the teams, and deciding what goes into the next sprints. Now, SAFe already has an infrastructure for that. It's called the program increment planning. It's not very hard to implement something like that in a relatively small company with, let's say, 5 to 10 teams. If you have more than that, maybe you need something else. But within 5 to 10 teams, you can easily have a group of product owners that comes together, let's say every week or every 2 weeks, and plans the next, say, 4 6 weeks for the teams. It's not impossible to do this. It's within the possibility. And when making these decisions, they are consulted by the people who have the investment decision in hand and decide whether they keep on investing in a certain delivery or they switch investment to another thing that has proven to be more important. It's not impossible to do this. This is why I'm continuously talking about no estimates, but also its portfolio cousin, which is let's think about software as an investment, not a project. We invest in certain software deliveries because we expect that it will have a value in return. If we don't see any evidence of that value coming back to us, turn the investment off in those areas, put some more investment in other areas.
Exactly, I agree. But I also know the reality and how this PI planning can go really awkwardly bad. But because if you don't, it is all about the mindset and seeing through and checking, like, do we really, does it make sense? Like, again and again, making this plan that's so detailed and especially bothering all the team, because here we are talking about, and the previous episode where I was talking with Benji, we were talking about flow metrics and how we can leverage it and how we can plan. And I still have pending the episode about Monte Carlo simulations, because that's how this project manager and what you're saying, people on this portfolio level could just look at the past and say, okay, usually if we try to right size somehow our epics, we have, let's say, 10 stories or less in our epics. Oh, sometimes there will be 12, sometimes there will be 8. It's okay, but not like 25 and 5. And then if we really look back, it took this time to do this many epics, and that they can plan this plan, right? Make a plan for 3 months without even talking to the team. They could, right? Maybe there will be some new technology. It's good to talk and ask, like, do you know, we have this new thing. Maybe we shouldn't even put it in a plan because we don't have enough knowledge, or we need to, start creating something. But I think when I was talking about it on my LinkedIn, and I was like, oh my God, I need to share it and see what people say and how they've solved those problems, I find out that what really could use, aside from all the frameworks, is like a 3-level planning. So we have some intentions for a year. Everybody likes to know something might happen or not. We put intentions, and you mentioned it. It's like those goals, right? Oh, we have this goal, that goal. This is what we would like to achieve in this year. Okay, great. We will not estimate it for you. You can ballpark it as you want, but please don't go to the team and ask them for the estimates and for the analysis of one-liners, Okay, then we have what you say. It could be a PI planning. It could be some planning for a quarter where we know more, and we go to this epic level and say, okay, we have this plan. This could work, right? This is our high-level plan estimation ballpark for those epics. They can fit in this 3 months. And then you have the commitment for a sprint or for whatever iteration you work with. And I think this could be so much more refreshing if we actually call it differently at each level and understand that this is an ongoing exercise and not just we do it once and then we wait what happens, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that your point about these 3 different layers is very important. It also fits very well with the naturally occurring time horizons, right? So you have a year, then you have a quarter, then you have a week or 2 weeks. And this is very important because at different levels, we're making different kinds of decisions. And what we don't want is for somebody planning the whole year in October of this year to plan next year to make decisions that people will need to follow at the weekly level 6 months from now. That makes no sense. But this is how we plan today. In fact, this is how project management requires us to plan today, because you then need to break down those goals into what they call budgets. And in order to budget something, you need to decide what needs to be done too early, because we will only know when we start, but we're already deciding now. So we're kind of, with the project planning approach to the yearly planning, we're actually compressing a whole year of planning that could happen on a cadence. We're compressing that to a couple of weeks where everybody's busy in a hurry to try to get all the plans together so that they are budgeted. So I would invite everybody to read into Beyond Budgeting and how they talk about the need to move from yearly budgets to rolling wave budgets. And rolling wave budgets are great because they are one step closer to what I'm talking about, which is this investment mindset. An investor does not say, I'm going to put this amount of money in this stocks or this investments exactly at this time, and I'm going to take it out at that time. Nobody thinks like that in investment. They have a portfolio, a bunch of money, then they invest that given the risk they want to take in certain things, some higher risk, some lower risk. And then based on how the market develops, they might put some more money in, they might take some money out. They're constantly adjusting their investment. They still have yearly goals, but they're adapting every day. So let's use that. Let's use those insights, that knowledge, that experience, because the investment mindset helps us to manage risk in a much more effective, concrete, and pragmatic way than any project management can ever do. I mean, think about this. So I'm looking at a chart. This is in How Big Things Get Done by Bent Fluvieri. And he has this chart, which is the iron law of project management. And it has 3 bars. The first bar is all projects on his database. He has tens of thousands of projects on the database. That's 100%, all projects. Okay. Projects on budget, 47.9%. That's less than 50% on budget. If you add to on budget also being on time, that goes to 8%, 8.5%, right? So that's already 91.5% of projects are not on time and on budget. And then if you consider all 3, which is on time, on budget, and on value, it's 0.5%. The project management infrastructure is bankrupt. It does not work. We need to find an alternative. And the alternative I'm talking about is, let's manage software as an investment. We put some money in, we check what we get out, and then we decide whether we put some more, or we stop doing that and move the money somewhere else.
Makes sense. I think it's a great closing words, because we made a loop and we came back to the money, which is the where we come from when we start, right? We have a budget, we have some investment that we want to make, and this is how we close the loop. So very interesting, and thank you for taking the time. I think it will be very valuable for the audience. I love to see the comments and how people react, especially when you see, I would invite everyone to do the same. Just a simple, even Jira has this dashboard. It's like, if Jira has this dashboard, it's very easy. So you can check it on your own. Take a few of your sprints, check how your estimates relate to the time. And I love it when I tell it to the teams and they say, oh, we don't estimate in time. And I'm like, great. What can I tell you? I'm happy you don't estimate in time and it works for you. So in the end, we need to estimate in time. So I would invite everyone to do this exercise and see for yourselves, and then decide what you want to do with your time at work, because you can probably do much better and more valuable things than estimate.
Absolutely. Let's find better.
Exactly. Let's stop wasting time. That's already such a big win, right? Thank you so much. Lovely to see you again. And just last but not least, I think we would invite everyone for the Agile Summit that's coming.
GlobalAgileSummit.com. So check it out, everybody. It's going to happen in May. This is where the best Agile thinking is happening today.
Exactly. And it will be in Tallinn, which I think is a great opportunity to also visit the city. Very beautiful. So thanks. Thank you again. Bye-bye.